The child of Gary, Indiana. A house on Jackson Street. Michael Joseph Jackson was born on the 29th of August, 1958 in Gary, Indiana, a gray industrial city on the southern shore of Lake Michigan. By a strange coincidence, the family lived on a street called Jackson Street, in a small two-bedroom house that held 11 people. Michael was the seventh of the 9 children who grew up there. There was one bathroom, almost no privacy, and very little money. Whatever else the world would later say about him, it began here, in a house smaller than most modern living rooms. The steel town. Gary existed because of steel. The great mills along the lake burned day and night, and the air carried the smell of iron and smoke. Michael's father, Joseph Jackson, worked as a crane operator in one of those mills. It was hard, dangerous, badly paid work, and it offered no escape. For a black family in the American Midwest in the 1950s, the future looked fixed, the mill for the sons, and something similar for the daughters. Joseph refused to accept that future for his children. A family of music. Music was already in the house. Catherine Jackson, Michael's mother, sang, played a little, and taught her children old country and gospel songs. Joseph himself had once played guitar in a rhythm and blues band called the Falcons, a dream he had given up when the children arrived. His guitar stood in the bedroom, and the boys were forbidden to touch it. Naturally, they touched it. When Joseph discovered that his sons could really play, everything changed. The father. Joseph Jackson became the manager, the trainer, and the disciplinarian of what would become the Jackson 5. He drove his sons through hours of daily rehearsal, correcting every step and every note. He could be violent, and Michael spoke about this openly in later years, describing a childhood shaped by fear as much as by love. Joseph always defended his methods, arguing that they had saved his children from the mills and the streets. Both things can be true at once. The discipline built one of the greatest performers in history, and it left wounds that never fully healed. The voice of a child. Michael was 5 when his family first realized what he could do. He sang a song at a school show, and the room fell silent. His brothers remembered the moment as slightly frightening. The voice was small and pure, but the feeling behind it did not belong to a child. He could already imitate the sounds he heard on the radio, the phrasing of James Brown, the ache of a gospel singer, the smooth control of Jackie Wilson. Soon he was singing lead, standing in front of brothers who were 5, 6, and 10 years older than he was. The price of the beginning. By the age of 7, Michael was performing in small clubs late at night. By 9, he had a professional contract. He never went to an ordinary school for long, never played freely in the street, never had what most people would call a childhood. Everything he became, the extraordinary discipline, the perfectionism, the loneliness, the lifelong fascination with children and childhood, was already forming in that little house on Jackson Street, in the smoke of the steel town, under the eye of a father who would not let his sons fail. The Jackson 5 and the Motown years. The brothers begin. The group began as a family band: Jackie, Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, and Michael. At first Jermaine sang lead. Then Joseph moved Michael to the front, and the effect was immediate. Audiences did not simply enjoy the small boy, they could not look away from him. Through the middle of the 1960s, the brothers played talent contests across the Midwest, winning almost everything they entered. The hard road. They traveled at night in an old Volkswagen bus, playing black theaters and nightclubs across the country, a circuit of venues that had supported African American performers for decades. Some of these places were rough. Michael, still a small child, watched from the wings as adult entertainers performed, and he studied every professional he saw. In 1967, the brothers won the famous amateur night at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, the hardest audience in America. It was the door opening. Motown. In 1968, the Jackson 5 signed with Motown Records in Detroit, the label of Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, and the Supremes. Its founder, Berry Gordy, decided to build the group's launch around Diana Ross, the biggest star he had. The publicity claimed that Ross had discovered them. In truth, the group had already been signed. It was Michael's first lesson in how the machinery of fame constructs its own stories. 4 number ones. What followed has never been repeated. The Jackson 5's first 4 singles all reached number 1 in the United States: I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save and the ballad I'll Be There, released between 1969 and 1970. Michael was 11 years old. He also began a parallel solo career, and in 1972 his tender song Ben gave him a number 1 hit under his own name. A childhood on stage. The brothers were now on television, on lunchboxes, and in their own cartoon series. Girls screamed at them. Behind the smiling photographs, Michael was working with the seriousness of an adult professional, rehearsing endlessly, studying older stars, and quietly absorbing the truth that his value depended on his performance. He would remember these years with a mixture of pride and grief, describing a boy who envied ordinary children playing in a park outside the recording studio window. What the Jackson 5 changed. The group's importance goes beyond the hits. They proved that black teenage performers could dominate mainstream American pop, and they created the template for the modern boy band, right down to the choreography and the marketing. For Michael, the Motown years were an education. He learned how a record is built, how a stage is filled, and how a crowd is held. He also learned that Motown decided everything: the songs, the sound, the image. Before long, he would want to decide those things himself. Leaving Motown, finding a voice. The break. In 1975 the brothers left Motown for a new label, Epic. It was a painful separation. Motown owned the name The Jackson 5, so the group became simply the Jacksons. Jermaine, who had married Berry Gordy's daughter, chose to stay behind, and his younger brother Randy took his place. The family had gained control of its own music, but at the cost of a divided household. The Jacksons. At Epic, the brothers were finally allowed to write and produce their own material. Slowly they found a harder, more confident sound, and in 1978 they scored a huge international hit with Shake Your Body, Down to the Ground, a song largely built by Michael and Randy. Michael was now 20, no longer the miracle child, and facing the most dangerous moment in any young performer's life, the moment when the audience has to be persuaded all over again. The Wiz and a New Friend. In 1978 Michael was cast as the Scarecrow in The Wiz, a film retelling of The Wizard of Oz with an all-black cast. The film was not a success, but it changed his life. The musical director was Quincy Jones, a jazz trumpeter, composer, and arranger of enormous experience. Michael asked him whether he knew a good producer for a solo album. Jones eventually suggested himself. Off the Wall. Off the Wall, released in August 1979, is the sound of a young man escaping. Jones brought discipline, jazz sophistication, and a superb band. The English songwriter Rod Temperton brought melodies of extraordinary elegance, and Michael, for the first time, wrote and sang as an adult. The album mixed disco, soul, funk, and pop into something weightless and joyful. It sold around 20 million copies and produced 4 hit singles. The Insult That Mattered. Despite this success, Off the Wall won only 1 Grammy, in a category reserved for rhythm and blues. Michael took the slight personally. He believed the industry was still placing black artists in a smaller room, away from the main prize, and he made a private promise: his next album would be impossible to ignore. He wrote down a target and kept it close, telling friends that he intended to make the biggest-selling record ever released. The Hunger for More. This is the essential Michael Jackson of the late 1970s, technically brilliant, commercially triumphant, and profoundly unsatisfied. He had found his voice, both literally and artistically. He had found his producer. He had found a way to combine the raw emotion of soul with the precision of a machine. What he had not yet found was the thing he wanted most, which was not money and not even fame, but a kind of proof, written in numbers so large that nobody could argue with them. Thriller and the Summit of the World. The Plan. Thriller was released on the 30th of November, 1982. Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones had a simple and ruthless idea: every single track had to be strong enough to be a hit single. There would be no filler, No weak songs placed between the good ones. They recorded, argued, discarded and rebuilt. Michael wrote 4 of the songs himself, including the 2 that would define him. The album. The result was a record that refused to stay in any one category. It contained hard funk, a rock song with a guitar solo by Eddie Van Halen, a horror story with a spoken part by the actor Vincent Price, a gentle ballad written by a member of the band Toto, and a chilling pop masterpiece about an accusation of fatherhood. 7 of its 9 songs became hit singles. Estimates of its sales vary, but no other album in history has sold more. The video revolution. The young MTV channel was, at that time, showing almost no black artists. The reasons offered were commercial. The effect was exclusion. Under heavy pressure from Jackson's record company, MTV finally played the video for Billie Jean in 1983. The channel's audience exploded, and the color barrier collapsed. Michael then went further, hiring the film director John Landis to make a 14-minute horror film for Thriller. The music video stopped being an advertisement and became a form of cinema. Motown 25 and the Moonwalk. On a television special celebrating Motown, recorded in March 1983, Michael performed Billie Jean alone on a bare stage. For a few seconds near the end, he glided backwards while appearing to walk forwards. He had not invented the step, which came from street dancers he had studied and asked to teach him, but from that night it belonged to him. The moonwalk became the single most imitated movement in the history of popular music. 8 Grammys. In February 1984, Jackson won 8 Grammy Awards in one evening, a record. He was 25 years old, and the most famous human being on the planet. The promise he had made to himself after Off the Wall had been kept, completely and publicly. The cost of being the biggest. A month before that triumph, while filming a Pepsi commercial, a pyrotechnic effect went wrong and set his hair on fire. He suffered serious burns to his scalp. The pain, the operations, and the medication that followed marked the beginning of a long and destructive relationship with prescription painkillers. It is a bitter symmetry. At the exact moment he reached the summit of the world, the injury began that would help to end his life 25 years later. Bad, Dangerous, and the Weight of Fame. After the summit. How do you follow the biggest album ever made? In 1985, Jackson wrote We Are the World with Lionel Richie, raising enormous sums for famine relief in Africa. In the same year he bought the publishing rights to most of the Beatles' songs, a shrewd and expensive decision that damaged his friendship with Paul McCartney and made him, in time, extremely rich. He was becoming a businessman as well as an artist. Bad, released in 1987, was written almost entirely by Jackson himself. It produced 5 American number ones, a feat no album had achieved before. The title track, filmed as a short film by Martin Scorsese, used a word from Blackstreet slang in which bad means tough, admirable, powerful. The record was harder and more aggressive than Thriller, and it launched his first solo world tour, which played to more than 4 million people. Neverland. With his new fortune he built Neverland, a ranch in California with a funfair, a cinema, a zoo, and a small railway. He invited sick children and children from poor neighborhoods to visit. To his admirers, it was an act of generosity by a man rebuilding the childhood he had never been given. To others it looked strange, and later it would look far worse. Neverland became the symbol of everything people found beautiful, and everything they found troubling, about him. Dangerous. In 1991 he left Quincy Jones and worked with the producer Teddy Riley, whose new Jack Swing style gave Dangerous a harder, more contemporary edge. The album sold over 30 million copies. Its songs moved between romance, rage, and a strong social conscience, and its videos, especially Black or White, were watched simultaneously by audiences across the world. In January 1993 he performed at the Super Bowl and transformed the halftime show forever. The first accusation. In August 1993 a 13-year-old boy accused Jackson of sexual abuse. Jackson denied the accusation completely and always maintained his innocence. No criminal charges were brought, The civil case was settled out of court in 1994 for a large sum of money, a decision his critics read as an admission and his defenders read as an exhausted man buying peace. His remaining tour dates were cancelled, and he entered treatment for dependence on painkillers. A changed man. Nothing was the same afterwards. The press, which had helped to build him, now circled. His appearance had been changing for years. He had been diagnosed with vitiligo, a condition that destroys the skin's pigment, and he had undergone cosmetic surgery. The world offered its own explanations, most of them cruel. In 1994 he married Lisa Marie Presley, the daughter of Elvis. The marriage lasted less than 2 years. The most famous entertainer alive was now also the most suspected. The Last Act and the Long Argument. History. In 1995 Jackson released History, a double album that combined his greatest hits with new songs of anger, grief and defiance. It was the record of a wounded man answering his accusers. Some of it is magnificent, some of it is bitter beyond music. One track was criticized for lines widely heard as anti-Semitic. Jackson said the words had been misunderstood and were meant to describe the language of prejudice rather than to express it, apologized, and altered the song. The Quiet Years. 3 children were born: Prince, Paris, and later Biguy. He became, by every account of those who knew him, a devoted and protective father. Musically, the decade closed slowly. Invincible, released in 2001, sold millions but was widely seen as a failure by his own impossible standards, and a public quarrel with his record company followed. His spending was enormous, and his debts grew. The Trial. In 2003 he was arrested and charged with child molestation. The Trial, in 2005, was broadcast around the world as entertainment. In June 2005 a jury acquitted him on every count. Legally the matter was closed. Publicly it was not. He left the United States for a time, living in Bahrain and then in Ireland, physically frail and financially exposed, an international symbol who no longer quite knew where he belonged. This is it. In March 2009 he announced a series of comeback concerts in London, titled This Is It. 10 shows were planned. Demand forced the number up to 50. He was 50 years old, extremely thin, and, according to those around him, both excited and afraid. Rehearsal footage shows a man whose voice and movement were still, in flashes, unmatched by anyone alive. The end. On the 25th of June, 2009 Michael Jackson died at his home in Los Angeles. The cause was an overdose of propofol, a powerful anesthetic that his personal doctor had been administering to help him sleep. The doctor, Conrad Murray, was later convicted of involuntary manslaughter. The news stopped the world for a day. Millions of people who had mocked him for years discovered that they were grieving. The Long Argument. His records have sold in the hundreds of millions. His dancing rewrote the vocabulary of the stage. His videos changed what a pop song could be, and he broke a color barrier that had held for a generation. And yet the accusations have never gone away. A documentary released in 2019 revived them, and his estate and family have rejected them absolutely. He was never convicted of any offense, and he denied everything to the end of his life. Some people separate the art from the man. Others cannot. Any honest account of Michael Jackson has to hold both the achievement and the accusation, without pretending that either one erases the other. I Want You Back. The sound of a new beginning. 10 seconds that changed pop. Few songs announce themselves as confidently as this one. Released in October 1969, I Want You Back opens with a cascade of piano notes falling like water, then a bass line arrives, then a guitar, and then, impossibly, the voice of an 11-year-old boy. It reached number 1 in America in January 1970, and it remains one of the most joyful recordings ever made. A song that almost belonged to someone else. The song was written by a Motown team known as the Corporation, which included the label's founder, Berry Gordy. It had originally been intended for other artists, and its title was different. Only when it was given to the Jackson 5 did it find its true shape. Motown's method was industrial. professional writers, professional session musicians, and endless takes until the record was perfect. Michael reportedly sang the lead many dozens of times. What the song is about. The words are a plea. A boy has let a girl go, thinking he did not need her, and he has understood his mistake too late. Now he stands in front of her, admitting that he was wrong and begging her to come back. It is a simple story of regret and pride, told in ordinary language, and it belongs to a tradition of soul music that turns everyday romantic disaster into something close to prayer. The strangeness of the voice. Here lies the paradox that would define Michael Jackson's whole career. A child of 11 cannot possibly have experienced what these words describe. And yet nobody who hears the record doubts him. The urgency, the breath, the tiny cracks of desperation are all completely convincing. Some listeners have found this thrilling, others have found it slightly disturbing, hearing in it the sound of a childhood spent performing adult emotion. Why it still works. The arrangement is a machine of pure momentum. Everything pushes forwards, the running bass, the hand claps, the brothers answering their lead singer, the way the song never once relaxes. It lasts under 3 minutes and wastes not a second. Generations of producers have studied it, and its opening bars remain instantly recognizable to people who were born decades after it was recorded. Language notes. The title uses a very common English structure, want plus an object plus back, meaning to wish for the return of something or someone you have lost. Notice the difference between I want you back and the polite request I would like you back, which sounds absurdly formal here. Useful words include to beg, to ask desperately, to realize, to understand suddenly, a mistake, a wrong action, pride, a feeling of self-importance that can prevent apology, and to take someone back, to accept a person again after a separation. I'll be there, a promise sung by a child. The fourth number one. By the autumn of 1970, the Jackson 5 had released 3 fast, bright, irresistible singles. I'll Be There was something else entirely, slow, serious, almost solemn. It became their 4th consecutive American number 1 and stayed at the top for 5 weeks, outselling everything else they ever recorded as a group. Motown had proved that the boys could dance. Now it proved that they could break your heart. A different kind of love song. The song is a promise. Whatever happens, the singer says, he will be present. Whatever is needed, he will provide. Whenever she calls, he will come. There is no seduction in it and almost no desire. It is about protection, loyalty and constancy, the things we hope for from a parent, a friend, or a partner in old age. This is why the song is sung at weddings and at funerals with equal ease. The arrangement. The music is built on restraint. A simple keyboard figure, a soft bass, strings that rise but never shout. Jermaine sings a verse, which gives the record its warm human center, and then Michael returns. Near the end he departs from the written melody and begins to improvise, stretching a single word across several notes in the manner of a gospel singer. It is one of the most famous moments in his early work. The child and the promise. There is an ache in hearing a 12-year-old promise eternal support to another person. Adults make such promises knowing how hard they are to keep. A child makes them absolutely. Perhaps this is why the record moves people so deeply. It carries an innocence that no adult singer could reproduce. Mariah Carey's celebrated version from 1992 is technically superb, and still slightly less devastating. What Motown understood. Berry Gordy, who co-wrote the song, knew that a group needs more than energy to survive. It needs a song that people will attach to the most important events of their lives. I'll Be There gave the Jackson 5 that permanence. 50 years later, it is still the record that people play when they want to say something they cannot say themselves. Language notes. The title is a future promise using will, contracted to I'll. English uses will for decisions and promises made in the moment, and be going to for plans already formed. Notice the use of there to mean present, at your side, rather than a literal place. Useful words include, to comfort, to make someone feel less sad, loyalty, faithful support, to rely on, to trust and depend on, a burden, a heavy weight, physical or emotional, and constancy, the quality of never changing. Ben, a love song to a rat. An unlikely hit. In 1972, Michael Jackson, aged 13, had his first solo #1 in the United States. The song was the title theme of a horror film about a boy who befriends a rat. The rat is called Ben. The song was nominated for an Academy Award. Nothing about this makes sense, and yet the record is genuinely beautiful. Where it came from. Ben was written by the lyricist Don Black and the composer Walter Schoff, and it was originally offered to another young singer of the period. When it came to Michael, the producers made no attempt to disguise its origin. He sings about a friendship with a small creature that the rest of the world despises, and he sings it with total sincerity. The secret subject. If you did not know the film, you would never guess. What the song actually describes is a friendship between two outsiders. The singer tells this friend that most people cannot see what he sees, that they run away instead of looking closely, and that they will never understand what the two of them have. It is a hymn to loyalty between the unwanted. Why it suited him. It is difficult not to hear something autobiographical in it, although Michael was too young to have said so. Here was a boy who lived surrounded by millions of admirers and almost no equals, who worked with adults, who was watched constantly, and who was, in the most ordinary sense, friendless. The song's central idea, that real understanding is rare and must be defended against a mocking world, would return in his music again and again across 4 decades. A voice on the edge. Listen closely and you can hear something else. The boyish soprano of I Want You Back is already thinning, the voice is beginning to change. Within 2 years it would be gone forever, replaced by the light, breathy adult tenor of Off the Wall. Ben is the last great record of the child, and part of its tenderness comes from the fact that we know what is about to happen. Language notes. Notice the vocabulary of exclusion and belonging. Useful words include an outsider, a person who does not belong to a group, to despise, to hate and look down on, to misunderstand, to fail to understand correctly, a companion, someone who is with you, and to stand by someone, to remain loyal in difficulty. Note also the film music tradition of the title theme, a song written to carry the name and the emotion of a film. Don't stop till you get enough, breaking free. The moment of independence. This is where Michael Jackson becomes Michael Jackson. Released in 1979 as the first single from Off the Wall, it was the first song he had written entirely by himself for a solo album. Everything before it had been chosen for him. This he chose. It went to #1 and won him the first Grammy of his adult career. How it was built. The song began, as most of his songs did, without any instruments at all. He could not read or write music. Instead he sang every part into a tape recorder, the bass line, the drums, the strings, all of it produced with his voice and then handed to musicians to reproduce. The record's percussion includes glass bottles struck in rhythm. Quincy Jones surrounded the idea with an orchestra, but the architecture is entirely Michael's. The whisper at the start. The song opens with Michael speaking, quietly, almost nervously, before the music begins. He was famously shy in the studio in these years, and sometimes recorded with the lights off or with his back turned to the control room. That spoken introduction is the sound of a young man persuading himself to step forward. Then the bass enters and he is gone, transformed, unstoppable. What it is about. On the surface it is a dance record about desire and about not stopping. But listen to the title as a statement of philosophy and it becomes something larger. Keep going. Do not stop when others are satisfied. Stop only when you yourself have had enough, which, in his case, meant never. It is the personal motto of the most relentless perfectionist in popular music, disguised as a party song. The falsetto. Notice the voice. Instead of shouting, he floats above the music in a high, light register called falsetto, punctuated by gasps, hiccups and sharp cries. These are not decorations. They function as percussion, filling gaps in the rhythm. He would develop this technique for the rest of his life, turning the human voice into part of the drum kit. Language notes. The title uses two features of informal spoken English. Till is a shortened form of until, and it is common in songs though rarely used in formal writing. To get enough here means to be fully satisfied. Notice the negative imperative don't stop, used for urgent encouragement rather than prohibition. Useful words include relentless, never stopping, a groove, a repeated rhythmic pattern that makes people move, to float, to move lightly, as if in air, and shy, nervous in the presence of others. Rock with you, elegance on the dance floor. A song out of time. By the end of 1979, disco was collapsing. Records were being destroyed publicly at baseball stadiums, and the word itself had become an insult. Into this hostile moment came Rock With You, a smooth, unhurried, immaculately dressed dance record. It went to number 1 and stayed there for a month. It is now regarded as one of the finest pop recordings of the 20th century. The English songwriter. The song was written by Rod Temperton, a quiet man from a fishing town in the north of England who had previously played keyboards in a funk band. Temperton would give Jackson 3 of his greatest songs, including Thriller. He wrote with an unusual sense of space, leaving room in every bar. Where other writers filled, he subtracted. The art of restraint. Nothing in this record is loud. The drums are soft, the bass is round rather than aggressive, the strings glide. Michael never once raises his voice. The song's power comes from what it withholds. It is the musical equivalent of a person who does not need to shout in order to command a room, and it works because every element is placed with absolute precision. What it is about. The words describe a night of dancing, and an invitation to spend it together. Below that, the song is about a particular kind of intimacy, the wordless understanding between two people moving to the same rhythm. Dancing, in Jackson's world, is never merely dancing. It is the purest available form of communication, and the one he trusted most. The meaning of rock. The English verb rock is unusually rich. A mother rocks a baby to sleep, a boat rocks on the water, a musician rocks a crowd, and a shocking event can rock a nation. In this title it means to move gently and steadily together. The word carries tenderness and rhythm at the same time, which is precisely the mood of the record. Language notes. Study the many senses of rock, as a noun, a large stone, as a verb, to move gently backwards and forwards, as a musical genre, and, informally, to be excellent. Useful words include smooth, even, without roughness, also elegant and confident, restraint, self-control, holding back, to glide, to move without effort, immaculate, perfectly clean and correct, and unhurried, calm, not rushing. Billie Jean, the story that was not true. The argument about the intro. Billie Jean begins with a drum pattern and a bass line that walk alone for almost 30 seconds before anything else happens. Quincy Jones wanted to cut them. He thought the introduction was far too long. Michael Jackson refused, saying that those bars were what made him want to dance. He was right. Producers still teach the disagreement as a lesson in trusting an artist. The story. A woman claims that the singer is the father of her child. He denies it, repeatedly and completely. He describes a warning given to him by his mother, the danger of a beautiful stranger, and the terrible position of a man who cannot prove a negative. The song never resolves. We are given a denial, delivered with total conviction, and we are left alone with it. Where it came from. Jackson said the song was not about one person. His brothers had been pursued by women making paternity claims, and he himself received letters from strangers who believed they had a relationship with him that did not exist. The song is really about fame as a form of persecution, the moment when other people's fantasies begin to have legal and moral consequences for you. Paranoia as music. Everything in the arrangement serves anxiety. The bass line circles obsessively, never resolving. The drums are dry, tight, and close, like footsteps in a corridor. Strings stab rather than soothe. Michael's vocal is full of gasps and sudden cries. This is not a song about paranoia, It is a song that reproduces the physical sensation of being watched. The night it became history. In March 1983, on a Motown anniversary television special, Jackson performed it alone. Near the end, he glided backwards across the stage. The moonwalk was not his invention, and he always credited the street dancers who taught it to him, but from that evening it defined him. The video for Billie Jean then forced MTV to open its playlist to black artists. One song broke a wall that an entire industry had built. Language notes. The song is a masterclass in reported speech and denial. Notice structures such as "she says that," followed by a rejection of the claim. Useful words include to claim, to state something as true without proof, to deny, to say that something is not true, an accusation, a statement that someone has done wrong, a rumor, an unverified story that spreads, an evidence, facts that support or disprove a claim. Beat it, courage and the refusal to fight. Crossing the border. In 1982, radio in the United States was strictly divided. Rock stations played white artists, black artists were confined elsewhere. Quincy Jones asked Michael Jackson to write a rock song. The result was Beat It, and to guarantee that nobody could dismiss it, they invited Eddie Van Halen, then the most admired rock guitarist in America, to record a solo. He did it in a single afternoon, for free, while his band was away. The message. The song sounds like an invitation to violence. It is the opposite. A young man is threatened, surrounded, pushed towards a fight he did not choose. The song tells him to leave. It argues that walking away is not cowardice, and that there is nothing brave about proving yourself with a knife. Jackson wanted to speak to teenagers about street violence without preaching at them, so he wrapped the sermon inside the hardest record he had ever made. The idiom. Beat it is informal English for go away quickly. It is what one says to an unwanted person, and it is also what one does to escape danger. But the verb to beat also means to strike, and to defeat. The title therefore holds two contradictory meanings at once, run away, and win. The whole song lives inside that tension. The video. The film, directed by Bob Giraldi, restages the story as a dance. Two gangs meet in a warehouse, a knife fight begins, and it dissolves into precise, unified choreography. Real members of Los Angeles street gangs appeared in it. It is easy now to forget how radical the image was: black and Hispanic young men on national television, dangerous and beautiful, and then, suddenly, dancing together. Why it mattered. Beat It won the Grammy for Record of the Year, and it did something no marketing plan could have achieved. It made the categories look ridiculous. After 1983, the question of whether a black artist could make rock music, or a rock audience could love a pop record, quietly ceased to be a question. Language notes. English is full of phrasal verbs built on beat: to beat someone up, to attack them physically, to beat someone, to defeat them, and to beat it, to leave quickly. Notice the direct imperative form used throughout the chorus, giving urgent advice. Useful words include cowardice, lack of courage, a gang, an organized group, often criminal, to back down, to withdraw from a confrontation, to provoke, to deliberately cause anger, and to escalate, to become more serious. Thriller, the song that became a film. A song called Starlight. Rod Temperton wrote the music first, under the working title Starlight. He then went home and filled a notebook with hundreds of possible titles, looking for a word that could open a whole world. He chose Thriller, partly because it suggested cinema, and partly because it sounded good sung. The song is a comic horror story: monsters approach, the night grows dangerous, and the singer offers protection while enjoying the fear. The voice of Vincent Price. At the end of the record, the actor Vincent Price, famous for decades of horror films, delivers a spoken passage in a tone of amused menace, and finishes with a laugh that many children of the 1980s remember better than any melody. He reportedly recorded it in 2 takes. It is one of the great examples of a guest appearance that transforms a record entirely. The short film. Jackson then did something unprecedented. He hired John Landis, a film director, and spent an enormous sum of money making a 14-minute film with professional makeup, a plot, a cast, and a choreographed sequence of dancing corpses. It was released in December 1983. Videocassettes of it sold in the millions. Nobody had understood, until that moment, that a music video could be an event. The problem of belief. Jackson was, at that time, a practicing Jehovah's Witness. Members of his congregation objected strongly to a film that appeared to celebrate the supernatural. He considered destroying the footage. In the end, a written disclaimer was added at the beginning, stating that the film did not reflect his personal beliefs. He later left the faith. The episode reveals a man caught permanently between the demands of art, family, and conscience. Why it endures. Thriller is not a frightening song. It is a song about the pleasure of being frightened, which is a very different and much older thing. Its choreography has been performed by school children, wedding parties, and prison inmates. 40 years on, it is played every October across the world. Few songs have been so completely absorbed into ordinary life. Language notes. A thriller is a story designed to produce excitement and suspense, from the verb to thrill. Notice how horror vocabulary works in English: to creep, to move slowly and quietly, to lurk, to wait in hiding, a corpse, a dead body, to shiver, to shake with cold or fear, and eerie, strange and frightening. Notice too the difference between scary, causing fear, and scared, feeling fear. Human nature. The quiet song. The song that arrived last. Thriller was almost finished when Quincy Jones received a cassette from Steve Porcaro, keyboard player of the rock band Toto. At the end of the tape, after some instrumental sketches, there was a fragile little song he had written about his young daughter's day at school. Jones stopped, rewound, and listened again. The lyric was rewritten by John Bettis, and one track was removed from the album to make room for it. A City at Night. The song describes a man looking out over a city after dark, drawn towards its lights and its strangers. He does not explain himself. Asked why he wants to go out into the night, why he wants to touch and be touched, why he is restless, he can only answer that this is what human beings are like. The reason is the absence of a reason. The phrase itself. Human nature is an old and slippery English expression. It means the set of qualities all people are supposed to share, and it is very often used as an excuse. When someone says it's only human nature, they are usually explaining a weakness rather than a virtue. The song understands this perfectly. It offers the phrase as a confession, gently, without apology and without defense. The sound. Everything is soft. Electric piano, brushed drums, a bass that barely moves. Michael sings almost in a whisper, using breath as an instrument, and the famous refrain is not really sung at all but sighed. On an album full of accusations, monsters, and street fights, this is the track where he stops performing. It is the most private 4 minutes of his recorded life. The Afterlife. Jazz musicians adopted it immediately. Miles Davis recorded a version. Later it became one of the most sampled melodies in hip-hop. Its structure is unusual, drifting rather than building, and it never quite resolves. That may be why so many artists keep returning to it. The song leaves a space, and every generation hears something different in it. Language notes. Study the why question as a rhetorical device, a question asked without expectation of an answer. Notice the idiom "it's human nature," used to explain behavior we cannot justify. Useful words include restless, unable to be still or satisfied, longing, a strong, sad desire, to drift, to move without direction, fragile, easily broken, and to confess, to admit something private or shameful. We Are the World. One Night, 45 Voices. The Famine. In 1984, a catastrophic famine in Ethiopia was killing hundreds of thousands of people. British and Irish musicians recorded a charity single. In America, the singer Harry Belafonte proposed the same idea, and the task of writing the song fell to Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie, with Quincy Jones producing. One Night. The recording took place in Los Angeles on the 28th of January, 1985, immediately after a major award ceremony, so that the biggest stars in America would already be in the same city on the same evening. More than 40 of them came: Bob Dylan, Stevie Wonder, Bruce Springsteen, Ray Charles, Diana Ross, Tina Turner, and many others. A handwritten sign was placed at the studio door instructing everyone to leave their ego outside. It worked. The record was finished by 8 in the morning. What the song says. The argument of the song is simple and deliberately unsubtle. There are people dying. We can help them. We are all one family, and the choice we make today decides who lives. There is no irony in it, no distance, no cleverness. Jackson wrote most of the melody and much of the lyric, and he sings the opening solo line himself. The criticism. The song has been attacked for decades. Critics call it self-congratulatory, arguing that it centers wealthy Western celebrities rather than the people they claim to help, and that its use of "we" quietly flatters the giver. These criticisms are serious and largely fair. It is also true that the record raised over $60 million, that it fed people, and that it created the model for almost every charity campaign that followed. Why it survives. Listen past the arguments and you hear something rare: a room full of enormous, competitive personalities briefly agreeing to serve a melody rather than themselves. Music can be many things. Occasionally it is a piece of practical machinery for moving money from where it is to where it is needed. This song was one of those. Language notes. The pronoun "we" is doing important political work here. It includes the listener and makes refusal difficult. Compare the distance of "they need help" with the involvement of "we are the world." Useful words include famine, an extreme shortage of food; relief, help given to those suffering; an ego, an inflated sense of one's own importance; charity, help given to those in need; and to pledge, to promise formally, often money. Bad, a word that means the opposite. The impossible follow up. After Thriller, every note Michael Jackson recorded was a response to an impossible expectation. Bad, released in 1987, was written almost entirely by him, and it produced 5 #1 singles in the United States, something no album had ever done. The title track is a challenge, thrown by a small, shy, extraordinarily rich man at anyone who thought he had gone soft. The meaning of bad. In African American vernacular English, bad had long been used to mean its opposite: tough, admirable, powerful, formidable. This inversion is old, and it is not unique. English speakers say wicked and sick to mean excellent. The song depends entirely on this double meaning. To announce that you are bad is not to confess a fault. It is to make a claim. The short film. Martin Scorsese directed an 18-minute film in a New York subway station. It was loosely inspired by the story of Edmund Perry, a black teenager from Harlem who won a place at an elite school and was later shot dead by a police officer. In the film, a young man returns from his expensive school to a neighborhood that no longer recognizes him and must prove that he still belongs. The dance sequence is the argument he cannot make in words. The uncomfortable question. There is something touching, and slightly absurd, in the spectacle of Michael Jackson, dressed in black leather and buckles, insisting on his own toughness. Critics noticed. Yet the film explains the song better than the song explains itself. It is not about being dangerous. It is about the terror of being seen as a fraud by the community you came from, which is a fear Jackson understood profoundly. The song with Prince. The original plan was a duet with Prince, his only serious rival. Prince declined. He later remarked, with characteristic wit, that the song would be a hit whether he sang on it or not. He was right, and popular music lost the confrontation it most wanted to hear. Language notes. This lesson is about semantic inversion, when a word comes to mean its opposite in informal speech. Compare bad, wicked, sick and killer, all of which can signal approval. Notice also the register. This vocabulary belongs to spoken, informal, often youth English, and would be wrong in a formal essay. Useful words include vernacular, the ordinary spoken language of a place; a fraud, a person pretending to be what they are not; to belong, to be accepted as part of a group, and to prove oneself, to demonstrate one's worth. The Way You Make Me Feel, The Shuffle and the Chase. A song built on a walk. Some songs are built from chords. This one is built from a rhythm you can walk to. Written by Jackson himself and released in 1987, it moves with a loose, swinging shuffle borrowed from old rhythm and blues, decorated with hand claps and a bass line that struts rather than runs. It went to number 1, and it is probably the happiest record he ever made. The feeling itself. The words are almost content-free, and deliberately so. A man sees a woman and is undone by her. He cannot describe what she does to him, only the effect. The song's central phrase is a grammatical structure rather than an image, and the whole lyric circles it, returning again and again to the fact of the feeling rather than the reason for it. The vocal performance. Michael sings this one with an open throat and a grin you can hear. Listen to the small sounds between the lines, the cries, the sharp intakes of breath, the wordless syllables. Nothing is accidental. Every gasp lands on a specific beat. He once explained that he heard his voice as a rhythm instrument first and a melodic one second, and no record demonstrates that better than this. The video problem. The film, shot at night in a stylized street, shows Jackson pursuing a young woman while a crowd of men encourage him. In 1987 it was received as playful. Today many viewers find the pursuit uncomfortable, and the woman's reluctance harder to read as flirtation. This is worth discussing honestly. Popular art carries the assumptions of its moment, and those assumptions do not always survive. What remains? Strip away the video and the song is untouched. It has the swing of a Motown record, the polish of the 1980s, and a lightness that Jackson, increasingly weighed down by fame, would rarely find again. Within 6 years his life would be in crisis. This is the sound of him at his most uncomplicatedly happy. Language notes. The title contains one of the most useful English structures, the causative make, followed by an object and a bare infinitive. You make me feel, you make me laugh, it makes me want to dance. No to is used after make in the active voice, though it returns in the passive, I was made to wait. Useful words include, to strut, to walk proudly, reluctance, unwillingness, to pursue, to follow, to chase, a shuffle, a loose, uneven rhythm, also a dragging walk, and giddy, light-headed with happiness. Man in the Mirror. Change begins with one person. A song he did not write. Michael Jackson wrote most of his own greatest hits. He did not write this one. It came from Siedah Garrett and Glenn Ballard, and when he heard the demo he reportedly said that he wished he had written it himself. Released in 1988, it became a number 1, and by the end of his life it had become the song most associated with his moral reputation. The argument. The song makes a philosophical claim, stated with unusual clarity. If you want the world to change, do not begin with the world. Begin with the person you see when you look into a mirror. Change that person first. Everything else follows. It is an ancient idea, found in almost every religious and ethical tradition, and the song presents it as a personal instruction rather than a general truth. The gospel engine. Structurally, the record is a sermon. It starts quietly, almost conversationally. Then a choir arrives, directed by the gospel legend Andraé Crouch, and the song begins to climb. By the final minute, Michael has abandoned the melody entirely and is improvising over the top of the choir, shouting, pleading, repeating himself. It is the sound of a pop record turning into a church service, and it works because he clearly believes every word. The self and the world. There is a criticism worth taking seriously. Songs about personal change can quietly excuse political inaction. It is easier to examine your conscience than to challenge a system. Yet the song is not asking for feeling, it is asking for a change of ways, for behavior rather than emotion. The mirror is not a place to admire yourself. It is a place where excuses become impossible. The performance. At the Grammy Awards in 1988 he performed it live, and by the end he was on his knees, apparently overwhelmed. After his death in 2009 the song was sung across the world, in vigils, in schools, and in churches. Whatever anyone believes about the man, the song has escaped him entirely. It now belongs to the people who sing it. Language notes. Focus on reflexive structures and self-reference. Look at yourself, ask yourself, change your ways. Notice the conditional pattern used to give advice. If you want to make the world better, start with yourself. Useful words include a mirror, a surface that reflects, to reflect, both to show an image and to think deeply, conscience, the inner sense of right and wrong, hypocrisy, claiming standards you do not follow, and to take responsibility, to accept that something is your duty. Smooth criminal, a mystery in a beat. The heartbeat. The song opens with a sound like a heart under stress, then a bass line arrives, hard and relentless. There is almost no harmony in Smooth Criminal. It is rhythm, tension, and voice. Released in 1988 from the Bad album, it is the darkest thing Jackson had recorded since Billie Jean, and possibly the most technically astonishing. The story, such as it is. A woman named Annie has been attacked in her apartment. There is blood on the carpet. The singer, and then a chorus of voices, ask urgently and repeatedly whether she is all right. We are never told. We do not learn who the criminal is, whether he is caught, or whether Annie survives. The song withholds everything a story is supposed to provide, and this is exactly why it disturbs. The word smooth. To be smooth is to be elegant, unhurried, and effortless. Applied to a criminal it becomes chilling, because it suggests violence performed with style, without haste, without guilt. Jackson's own performance is smooth in precisely this way, every syllable placed exactly, every breath controlled. The horror of the record lies in the gap between the frantic events described and the icy discipline of the singer. The lean. In the accompanying film, set in a 1930s nightclub, Jackson and his dancers lean forward from the ankles at an angle no human body should sustain. The trick was achieved on stage with specially designed shoes that lock onto a peg rising from the floor. Jackson and two colleagues were granted a United States patent for the device. He is one of very few musicians in history to hold a patent for an item of dance equipment. Dance as language. Watch the film without sound and the choreography still tells you something is wrong. The movements are sharp, military, obsessively precise, and they occasionally freeze. Jackson understood that dance could carry narrative information that words could not. In this song the body does the storytelling, and the lyric merely asks its question over and over, without ever receiving an answer. Language notes. Study smooth across its meanings: a smooth surface, flat, a smooth journey, without problems, a smooth talker, persuasive, possibly untrustworthy, and a smooth operator, skilled and calm. Notice the repeated urgent question form used to create panic. Useful words include relentless, never letting up, to withhold, to refuse to give, a witness, a person who sees a crime, to lean, to bend from the vertical, and eerie, strange and frightening. Black or White, a song about skin. The biggest premiere in history. In November 1991, the video for Black or White was broadcast simultaneously in 27 countries to an estimated 500 million viewers. Nothing on that scale had been attempted for a piece of music. The song went to number 1 in America within 3 weeks, the fastest ascent in over 20 years. The argument. The song's claim is stated without ambiguity: a person's race is not a reason to reject them, and love does not consult the color of skin. Jackson delivers this over a hard rock guitar figure, and the record includes a spoken rap verse, then a relatively new device in mainstream pop. It is optimistic, direct and, some would say, simplistic. It was also, in 1991, still a controversial thing to say on daytime television. The Morphing Faces. The film, directed by John Landis, ends with a sequence in which men and women of every visible ethnicity sing the song while their faces transform seamlessly into one another. The technology, called morphing, was almost new. The point was made without a single word: the categories we treat as absolute are, in fact, a continuous surface. It remains one of the most quoted images in the history of the music video. The Panther sequence. There was a further 4 minutes. Alone in an empty street at night, Jackson danced with escalating fury, smashed windows, and destroyed a car. Complaints arrived immediately. The sequence was violent, and its sexual gestures were considered inappropriate for children. He apologized and had it removed. Critics have since argued that this coda was the honest half of the film, the rage beneath the optimism, and that removing it silenced exactly what needed to be heard. The man singing it. By 1991, Jackson's own skin had visibly lightened, the result of vitiligo, a condition that destroys pigment. Millions assumed he was trying to become white, and mocked him for it. When such a man sings that it does not matter whether you are black or white, the sentence carries a private weight that no listener can fully measure. Language notes. Notice the exclusive or in the title, which forces a choice between two options, and how the song works to dissolve that choice. Compare black or white, a decision, with black and white, a combination, and with the idiom in black and white, clearly and definitively. Useful words include prejudice, an opinion formed without knowledge, to dissolve, to make disappear gradually, pigment, the substance that gives color, a category, a class into which things are divided, and ambiguity, the state of having more than one meaning. Remember the Time, Love and Memory. A new producer. For Dangerous, released in 1991, Jackson did not work with Quincy Jones. He turned instead to Teddy Riley, the young architect of New Jack Swing, a style that welded the swagger of hip-hop rhythm to the melody of soul. Remember the Time is the finest thing they made together, hard, snapping drums beneath a melody of extraordinary sweetness. What the song does. The song asks a question, repeatedly and tenderly. Do you remember? It invites a former lover to return with him to a specific season, a specific place, and to confirm that what happened there was real. It is not a song of complaint or of hope. It is a song of shared memory, which is a much rarer subject in pop music than either desire or regret. The film. The 9-minute film was directed by John Singleton and set in ancient Egypt, with Eddie Murphy as the pharaoh, the supermodel Iman as the queen, and the basketball star Magic Johnson among the courtiers. Its casting was a quiet political act, a black civilization of enormous sophistication, presented on primetime American television as glamorous, powerful and entirely normal. Nostalgia and its danger. Nostalgia is a complicated emotion. It preserves the past by softening it. When the narrator asks his lover to remember, he is asking her to agree to a version of events, and the song never tells us whether she does. There is a small anxiety hidden inside the sweetness. What if she remembers it differently? What if she does not remember at all? The dance. The choreography, performed on sand in bare feet, is among Jackson's most fluid. It has been reproduced endlessly, and it demonstrates a principle he never abandoned. Difficulty must be invisible. The steps are punishing, the appearance is effortless. He rehearsed each sequence for weeks so that it would look as though it had occurred to him a moment before. Language notes. English distinguishes carefully between remember doing something, recalling a past event, and remember to do something, not forgetting a duty. I remember locking the door is a memory. I remembered to lock the door is an action completed. Useful words include nostalgia, sentimental longing for the past, to recall, to bring back to mind, to reminisce, to talk pleasantly about the past, vivid, clear and powerful, and to fade, to become gradually weaker or less clear. Heal the World, the song he was proudest of. His own favorite. Asked more than once which of his songs meant most to him, Michael Jackson named this one. Critics did not agree. Released in 1992, Heal the World was widely described as naive, sentimental and vague. It reached number 2 in Britain and number 27 in America, and it founded a charity, the Heal the World Foundation, which flew sick children for treatment and sent aid to war zones. The structure. It begins with a child speaking. Then a slow melody, a rising chorus, and a final section in which children's voices join Jackson's own. Musically it is a hymn, and it employs every device a hymn employs: repetition, gradual accumulation, a wide simple melody that an untrained crowd can sing together. This is not incompetence. It is a different set of intentions. The case against it. The complaint is that the song asks for a better world without ever naming who prevents it. There is no politics in it, no enemy, no cost. Make it a better place is not a policy. Compare the specificity of a Bob Dylan protest song, which names the makers of weapons, with the soft universality of this one. The criticism is legitimate. The case for it. And yet, in January 1993 Jackson performed it at the Super Bowl, in front of the largest television audience of the year, surrounded by thousands of children. The audience held up cards that formed images of children across the stadium. That show is now regarded as the moment the Super Bowl halftime performance became a cultural event. Sincerity, badly out of fashion in the criticism of the period, is not the same thing as stupidity. Why we still argue. The song exposes a permanent disagreement about should a work of art be complicated, ironic and truthful about how difficult goodness is. Or may it sometimes simply say the obvious thing, loudly, to as many people as possible, in the hope that a few of them act. Jackson chose the second. It is not the choice a critic would make. It may be the choice a foundation makes when it has an aeroplane to fill. Language notes. Note the verb to heal, used both literally, of a wound closing, and figuratively, of a divided society. Note the inclusive imperative let's, used to propose shared action, let's make it a better place. Useful words include, sentimental, expressing emotion in an exaggerated way, naive, lacking experience, too simple, sincere, truly meant, to mend, to repair, and a wound, an injury, physical or emotional. They don't care about us, anger and controversy. The album of the wound. History, released in 1995, followed the accusation of 1993 and the settlement of the civil case. Half of the record is a collection of his greatest hits, the other half is new material of remarkable bitterness. They Don't Care About Us is its hardest track, driven by a marching, military rhythm and a chorus shouted rather than sung. The complaint. The song is a protest against the treatment of the powerless by institutions, police brutality, discrimination, and a media that consumes people and discards them. Jackson later said explicitly that it was written on behalf of the oppressed. The they of the title is never identified, and the us is left open, so that any listener who feels unheard may enter the song and occupy it. The controversy. 2 lines of the original lyric used words that many listeners heard as anti-Semitic. The reaction was immediate and severe. Jackson responded that he had intended to place the language of bigotry in the mouth of the bigot, that he was describing prejudice rather than expressing it, and that he was appalled to have caused pain. He apologized publicly, and later pressings of the album were altered. Some critics accepted the explanation, others did not. It remains a genuine and unresolved dispute. The 2 films. Spike Lee directed 2 versions. The first was filmed in a favela in Rio de Janeiro and among a drumming group in Salvador de Bahia, with the Brazilian authorities objecting that it would damage tourism. The second was filmed inside a prison and intercut real news footage of police violence, of political killings, of genocide. Several television channels refused to broadcast it. What to do with it? This is a difficult lesson, and it should be. Here is a song of real moral force, written by a man in real pain, which caused real harm through its choice of words, and which was defended by its author in terms that some found sincere and others found insufficient. Studying popular music honestly means sitting with problems like this rather than solving them. Language notes. Note the vagueness of the pronouns they and us, a common device in protest writing. It creates solidarity by leaving the group undefined. Note also the difference between care about, to feel concern for someone, and care for, to look after someone. Useful words include brutality, extreme cruelty, oppression, unjust use of power over others, a slur, an insulting word aimed at a group, bigotry, intolerance of those who differ, and to appall, to shock deeply.
Earth Song, A Cry for the Planet. The strangest number 1. Earth Song spent 6 weeks at number 1 in the United Kingdom over Christmas 1995. It is nearly 7 minutes long. It has no conventional chorus. It builds from a whispered opening to a screamed conclusion, and it combines blues, gospel, and something close to opera. It was never released as a single in the United States, and it is, by a distance, the most extreme thing in his catalog. The questions. The song is constructed almost entirely from questions, in the manner of a lament. What about the forests? What about the animals? What about the children? What about the dead? Jackson does not answer any of them. He simply asks, again and again, until the questions themselves become unbearable. The technique is very old, it is the structure of a funeral song. The anger. Halfway through, the record changes character. The blues gives way to a gospel choir, and Jackson begins to shout, tearing at his own voice, throwing out single words about war, animals, elephants, whales, forests and the sea. What was mourning becomes accusation. It is one of the very few times in his recorded work when the perfectionist audibly loses control, and it was almost certainly deliberate. The Brit Awards. He performed it at the Brit Awards in London in 1996, descending as a figure in white amid children and a crowd of the poor. The singer Jarvis Cocker walked onto the stage in protest, believing the staging presented Jackson as a Christ-like healer of the world. The incident became a national scandal. It also asked a real question about the point at which sincerity becomes self-regard, and nobody has ever settled it. The subject remains. Whatever one thinks of the staging, the song's subject has not gone away. Written 30 years ago, it names deforestation, extinction, the pollution of the oceans and the children of war. It offers no solution, because it has none. It only insists that we look, and that we say out loud what we see. That, in the end, is what a lament is for. Language notes. The phrase "what about" is used to raise a neglected topic or to protest an omission. Learn also the rhetorical question, asked to produce an effect rather than an answer. Useful words include, a lament, a passionate expression of grief, deforestation, the destruction of forests, extinction, the permanent disappearance of a species, grief, deep sorrow, and to mourn, to feel and show sorrow for what has been lost. Michael Jackson the dancer, the body as instrument. What he inherited. No great dancer appears from nowhere. Jackson studied, obsessively and openly, the people who came before him. From James Brown he took the sudden freeze, the spin, the drop to the knees. From Fred Astaire he took elegance, the idea that the whole body from hat to shoe must be part of the line. From Jackie Wilson he took showmanship, from Bob Fosse the tilted hat and the isolated shoulder, and from the street dancers of Los Angeles he took the vocabulary of popping and locking. The moonwalk. He was always honest about it. The backward glide had existed for years, a mime called Marcel Marceau had performed something like it, and young dancers on a television program called Soul Train had perfected it. Jackson invited 2 of them to his house and asked to be taught. What he added was context. Performed alone, in a silver jacket, at the exact climax of Billie Jean, in front of 47 million people in May 1983, the step stopped being a trick and became an image of the 20th century. The physics of the lean. In Smooth Criminal, he leans forward at 45 degrees with a straight body. This is not possible, the human ankle cannot hold it. On film it was done with wires. On stage it was done with a shoe he helped to design, containing a slot that locks onto a peg rising from the floor at the correct moment. He holds a United States patent for it. He wanted the illusion to work live, in front of people, without cinema. Work, not magic. The most instructive thing about his dancing is how little of it was spontaneous. He rehearsed a 4-minute routine for months. He watched footage of himself frame by frame. He argued about the placement of a single finger. The apparent ease is the product of a labor so extreme that it can only be described as fanatical, and that labor was concealed with total success. This is a definition of artistry that applies far beyond dance. The music in the body. Watch him without sound. You will still hear the rhythm. Every movement is placed against a beat, and the sharp ones, the toe stands, the freezes, the snap of a hat brim, fall precisely where a drum falls. He treated his body as a percussion instrument, in exactly the way he treated his voice. The gasps in his singing and the kicks in his dancing served one purpose, to make the rhythm visible. The inheritance. Almost every performer who has filled a stadium since 1990 has taken something from him: the choreographed pop show, the dancing on television, the idea that a singer must also be seen. Some have said so gratefully. Whatever else is disputed about him, this is not. He changed how the human body moves to music, and the change has not been reversed. Language notes. Vocabulary of movement is unusually rich in English. Useful words include: to glide, to move smoothly without visible effort, to freeze, to stop suddenly and completely, to spin, to turn rapidly, to snap, to move sharply and suddenly, fluid, flowing, without breaks, and effortless, appearing to require no effort. Note the useful adjective spontaneous, unplanned, and its opposite, rehearsed. The man behind the mask, fame, childhood, and the unfinished story. The child who never was. Every account of Michael Jackson begins in the same place: a small boy singing to adults in nightclubs, rehearsing under a frightening father, watching other children play through the window of a recording studio. He said, many times, that he had never had a childhood, and that he had spent his adult life trying to construct one. Neverland, with its funfair and its zoo, was the literal architecture of that attempt. The changing face. From the mid-1980s his appearance altered dramatically. He was diagnosed with vitiligo, a real and documented autoimmune condition in which the skin loses its pigment in spreading patches. The autopsy after his death confirmed it. He also underwent repeated cosmetic surgery, which he mostly denied. Between the disease and the surgery lies a territory nobody can map with certainty. How much was medicine? How much was self-hatred? How much was the ordinary vanity of a man photographed several thousand times a day? The press. He was, for 25 years, the most photographed person alive, and for much of that time the press treated him as a comic grotesque. Stories were invented and reprinted for decades. He responded by retreating further, by wearing masks and veils, by surrounding himself with people who were paid to agree with him. The withdrawal fed the mockery, and the mockery fed the withdrawal. It is not a defense of anything to observe that this is a recognizable machine, and that it destroys people. The accusations. In 1993 a boy accused him of sexual abuse. The civil case was settled out of court and no charges were brought. In 2005, after a criminal trial, a jury found him not guilty on every count. He denied all wrongdoing throughout his life. In 2019 a documentary presented detailed allegations by two men who had known him as children. His estate and family rejected the allegations completely, and the dispute continues in public and in the courts. These are the facts, and they are not tidy. The question for the listener. So what should we do with the music? Some listeners cannot hear it anymore, and that response is entirely legitimate. Others separate the work from the man, arguing that Billie Jean belongs now to the millions who dance to it. Others hold both at once, listening with pleasure and discomfort together. There is no correct answer, and anyone who offers you one quickly is selling something. Why we still study him? We study him because the story is genuinely important. It contains the industrial exploitation of a child, the collision of race and celebrity in America, the invention of the modern pop spectacle, and the question of what a society does with an artist it both worships and suspects. Understanding a language means being able to discuss things that are difficult. Michael Jackson is difficult. That is precisely why he is worth the words. Language notes. This lesson uses the careful, hedged language of responsible discussion. Note structures such as he was accused of, the allegations were denied, no charges were brought, and he was acquitted. Useful words include an allegation, a claim of wrongdoing, not yet proved, to acquit, to declare formally not guilty, a settlement, an agreement ending a legal dispute without a trial, to deny, to state that something is untrue, scrutiny, close and critical observation, and unresolved, not settled or decided.